Okay, awesome. Yeah, here just outside in Winnipeg, it's a mix of sunny and as well this area is pretty cold. Um, yeah, there's a lot of snow outside, but we're hoping to get a mild temperature for this coming week. But yeah, I bet folks at India it's pretty quiet. It's quite late there. Abhishek, thanks for joining. We'll be starting off right away. Okay, and it's either 12 attendees, so we would just start off and people would join in along as we go along. Anyway, so let's start. Okay, today's agenda will be, it's quite short and simple. We're starting off at 1 and it's gonna go for an hour, 30 minutes or even less. Hopefully, we just want to get this short, sweet, and straightforward. So it's just introductions, community updates, then the main presentation, which will be Tirthankar, who is our speaker, will be speaking on integrating with WebSockets. Okay, see folks joining. Awesome. Yeah, welcome, Igor. And then we'll take questions and answers, announcements, and that's it. It's bye-bye. Just one thing I would want to stress here is in the course of the presentation, we'll take breaks intermittently to address some questions, any pending questions. That way we don't have to wait up to the end before taking any questions. So I guess that's a note to Tirthankar. So we'll just, we'll give some breaks in between to address any pending questions. All right, and that's it. So who am I? Well, my name is Mana Akman. I have a background in optometry. I used to be, I like to joke, I say in my former life I was kind of like working on the eye, and now I'm working on computers. But I'm currently a certified MuleSoft platform integration architect, platform architect and integration architect, working in Wawanisa Insurance here in Winnipeg. And I'm one of the co-organizers of the Winnipeg Meetup as well. So again, that's it for me. And a little bit of community update, just for those who are not aware about the MuleSoft developers LinkedIn, the LinkedIn handle. There's a LinkedIn handle from MuleSoft developers, and it's quite helpful since it was created in December 2020, and it will be like a source of truth for anything regarding anything around the MuleSoft community. So if you haven't followed that page, feel free to follow that page. It's quite helpful. As well, the Anypoint platform development fundamental course is still ongoing for Mule 4, and it's again, as it says, it's a 5-day self-paced free program. And as well, it's after this, it's all free, and after this you have I think 2 attempts to write the Mule 4 developer exam. So check it out if you're interested. The link is right there in the slide, and this slide will also be posted on the Winnipeg community page, MuleSoft community page. So feel free to check it out. Sultana is saying, is the level 1 exam free after taking this level 1 training? Correct. It's all free. Correct. And you have 2 attempts, I believe. Okay. All right, awesome. Oops. There you go. And again, I see there are a lot of there are some meetup leaders here, and as well, these meetups are happening all around the world. And we're building a community. We as well want the MuleSoft community to grow in Winnipeg, as well as in Canada, which is really, it's gaining traction. So if you're interested in becoming our next speaker, or just the next speaker of any MuleSoft event, meetup, you can sign up here if you have some use cases or challenges that you've overcome in the course of your your MuleSoft experience, you can just submit the form there. If you want to give a present to Winnipeg, that first text box is for you. Just put the city, whatever city you want to speak at, and just put in your details, and we'll get you on your way, right? And just a quick note about today's trivia. Just like any of our meetups, we have 3 questions and 3 winners. And it's going to go something like this. In the course of prior to now, we used to use Kahoot. We've experimented with a couple of other platforms, but we're just gonna take it easy, simple, and we will, in the course of the presentation, while our main speaker is presenting, there's some questions that 3 questions will be asked in the general channel, in the general chat window. And the first person to answer the question correctly would have the opportunity to win a MuleSoft training voucher. All right. So we have open spot for 3 people. And again, these questions will be asked in the course of the presentation, and it's going to be about the presentation. So, put your ears down. If you're interested in participating, please feel free to answer the questions in the general. Again, the questions will be asked in the general channel, in the general chat, and Q&As. If you have questions regarding the presentation itself, we have a Q&A chat where you can ask your questions. I've opened it up for questions, so feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A chat. All right, and just a quick thing here for the 3 people who will be able to win a voucher. There is an eligibility criteria, and only 1 voucher per winner per month. So because we have this Meetups event happening everywhere virtually, so we want to as well spread this out. So if you've won a voucher this month in February already in a different meetup, you won't be able to participate in today's trivia. So that's just a keynote. I would also put this in the chats too as well, just so that people joining in afterwards would be informed, right? I believe that's the only eligibility criteria. And next. All right, and I believe Tirthankar is ready. I'll just do a quick introduction. Again, our keynote speaker for today is Tirthankar. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. If I'm not, I do my best. Tirthankar Kundu. Did I get that right?
I think that you sound really good with that name.
Awesome. I've been practicing. Yeah,
Sure.
awesome. Yeah, and he's a keynote speaker. Thanks. He's been really helpful to just take up the challenge to come present for us as a 3rd place winner of MuleSoft Hackathon, which was concluded last in November, I believe. He's a full stack developer, proficient in both front end and back end technologies, currently working at Persistent Systems as a senior MuleSoft developer. He's also certified with his MuleSoft as a MuleSoft integration architect as well as a developer. Today, he will be presenting on the topic integrating with WebSockets using MuleSoft. Without any further ado, I would like to welcome Tirthankar. Tirthankar, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Munna.
So I'll stop sharing now. Just stop sharing.
It's visible, right, Manna? All right.
Great.
I think Manna already introduced me, but just I added another slide just to introduce myself. So the only thing that changed maybe is that I have started a new blog that I just wanted to highlight, which is this particular one called bitmaskers.in, and I have I have been writing few blogs over there, which you all can check out. And whatever I've been I'll be showing today is also there in that blog, so people can check that over there as well. So everything is there. I mean, you can always go back and check there. Okay, so yeah, so that's it from my side, and we can connect over LinkedIn or any sources, and you can come up with questions. So I'm always there. Okay, now coming to the main topic that I'll be discussing today. So before I go into the WebSockets, I briefly want to talk about what the current architecture of client server looks like. So it's something called half duplex communication, where something like this happens, right? So we have a client and we have servers, or we have clients, multiple clients, and we have one server. So client sends a request, you get back a response. The client sends a request, you get back a response. So it is like a communication wherein the request is always initiated from the client side. So this is one very important thing that happens in this client server architecture, right? So let's suppose that you have to run a very a cumbersome job in the server, and after some time you need to get the response back. So in this certain use case, you have to always poll the server. You have to check that whether that job is completed. Give me the response. So after every point of time, you will be polling the server, which will be adding a load to it, right? So every time you poll the server, it's kind of using some resource which could be avoided if there is a way where the server could initiate a conversation with the client. So this is one important thing that can be revolutionized, and it can be used to larger extent. So this is where WebSockets come to a rescue. So it is a full duplex communication. So what does that mean? So it means that there is a client and there is a server. So the client initiates a request and it opens a bidirectional channel. Now the message can not only be sent from server to client, but also from client to server and vice versa. So let's consider the same use case that I talked about earlier, right? So if the client requests for something which is cumbersome and it takes some time, so the client doesn't have to always poll to get back the response. Whenever the server is done its job, it will send a message back to the client over this bidirectional channel. And if one of them closes the channel, the whole connection is closed. So you can see how this can be very useful in the event-driven architecture that we talk about. So a lot of people will be talking about event-driven in the backend, right? So that's where we'll be using Saga strategies and whatnot. So there are a lot of things, but people don't think, most of the technologies that we use today is some way connected to some front end, right? Some client will be there. Let's consider that that client is an Android app. It can be an iOS app. It can be some web app. So how do you bring that event-driven architecture onto the front end and the back-end communication? So this is where the WebSockets are really useful. So it's a marvelous technology which can be used in a lot of use cases, and it can bring it can do wonders in the integration. So let's briefly understand what do we mean by this two-way interactive communication. So WebSocket is a communication, computer communication protocol providing full duplex communication. Now, client server, as I told earlier, is a half duplex, right? So the client sends the request, you get back the response from the server. But over here, it's a full duplex one. The WebSocket API is an advanced technology that makes it possible to open a two-way interactive channel between the user's browser and the server. So it's just not user's browser, but it is also something that can be used over iOS application, like using Objective-C, Swift, or maybe even Android, Java, Kotlin, whatever. Like we can use all these technologies over there as well. So it's not just sticking to a particular technology. So people might also know about Socket.io, which is a very a WebSocket technology used in Node applications a lot. So Socket is really useful. Now let us talk about the connector, right? So I already told that we'll be using connector, or the MuleSoft provides a lot of connectors. So there is a WebSocket connector which can be used for this particular use case. Now, Mule WebSocket connector is not available for all the Mule runtimes. So it has to be noted that only Mule 4.2.2 or higher has the compatibility of WebSocket connector. If somebody is running below it, sorry to say, you cannot use this technology or the APIs of WebSocket. Pretty standard Java 1.8 and Studio 7.4 or higher. So this comes from the compatibility point of view. Now, what are the different socket types that are present in this WebSocket connector? So it is inbound. So what do you mean by inbound? So inbound is where your Mule app works as a server. So it works as a WebSocket server, and clients from various different technologies, not specific to Mule, can connect to this WebSocket server. So in the hackathon, I kind of integrated two applications. One was a web-based, and the other was an Android application. So that is where I used inbound connections. But there is also a possibility of using outbound connections. So the outbound connection is where MuleSoft is working as a client application, and it can connect to the WebSocket servers. Now that server need not be always in MuleSoft. It can be written in any server-side technology that is there in the market today. So these are the two types of socket types that can be used in Mule WebSocket connector. So what are the common use cases where we can see WebSockets being used? So the first one is a chat app, which is something that I'll be showing today. So why chat app? Like with this question might come into the head, like why does chat app needs this WebSocket connection? Now see, the chat app, it is very you cannot always poll for the messages. It becomes very cumbersome. Let's consider that there are 100 people joining into a room, and then each client polls the server every time that is there any new message coming in for me, is there any new message coming in for me. So that way you will be adding a lot of pressure to the server. So that's not needed, right? So you want the response to be immediate, and it has to be done as soon as some messages comes to you. So that is where the routing part of it comes in. So the WebSocket server is listening from all the clients, and it will route the appropriate messages to each of these clients. So you can easily understand how routing and stuff can be also important in along with the WebSockets. But the use case remains prevalent, right? That the chat application, you cannot always poll the server for new messages. So that is where chat application is something that can be used as a WebSocket. The next is the stock quotes app. So let's consider there's a stock quotes app, like it pings for what is the change in the stock price. Now if you will be using the half duplex communication, that is the client server architecture, you have to poll every single time for the change in the stock ticks. Now consider so many stocks are there in market, and multiple people will be communicating with the server to get the latest price of that stock. So doing it in the traditional way is definitely not helping. So we need to use this new technology, which is a WebSocket, wherein every time there is an event triggered that there is a change in the stock price, it will be immediately sent to the clients who will be connecting to that server. Okay, so now I'll come to the demo part, but before that, is there any question that we need to take?
Tirthankar, the only comment I would just make here is just the pace. If you can just slow your pace down just a notch, a bit.
Okay, sure. Sorry, sorry.
Yeah, that's
okay.
it. Yeah, that's it. But so far, so good. There are no Q&As, so I think there are no questions yet. So you're good to go.
Let's try something. Let's try this application working over. Let's share this with the people, and let's see if people can connect to it. So does it have HTTPS? Yes. Okay. So guys, can you please connect to this this address, and let me know if you are able to connect to it. So you might be getting some error saying that it's not. I mean, it will say that the SSL error, but you can just proceed and you can just let me know if you are able to connect to it. Okay, great. So let me also connect. Okay, great, great. Did you guys receive a message by any chance? Great, 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 great. So as you can see, right? So this is the wonder that can be done using the WebSocket. Uh, the UI, I mean, we can ignore the UI. This is not the best UI I can come up with. I just tried to change it from what I did for the hackathon, but the technology still remains the same. So as you can see, and I feel that all of you might be getting the messages as well, right, from all other people. So this exactly what it does over here, right? This chat can now be transferred to this chat, so we can post our questions here, and you must be getting the messages. So I think this is the beauty of this, and I mean, till the time we are connected. So this, I mean, let's consider, the motive behind this application. So you all might be hearing a lot that the privacy policy with WhatsApp and whatnot. So that was kind of the motive, or the thought process behind what I came up with this application. I thought, why don't we create a chat application which will be giving us a foolproof solution, as in, that there is no data breach per se. So I am sure that I am not saving any of your messages that you guys are sending me. So that way, I mean, it's not the the best app out there that can do a lot, but this can definitely be an alternative to a lot of these applications that we have in store. Uh, Now this particular one, this is talking to the Mule server, which is a WebSocket server. So as I talked earlier, so Mule server in this case is working as an inbound socket type. So this is where the client is talking to the Mule server, right? So in this case, I have used JavaScript for my client side coding. So the client side will be talking to the Mule inbound WebSocket server, and all the messages from here will first go to that server, and then from there it will be sent back, or broadcasted to all the other users connected. So that is how you might be seeing all these messages coming, and every time the message comes, we kind of check, who the message is coming from, and then we route the messages. Now this one is particularly for one single room, so it can be modified and made into multiple other rooms. So let's consider that you want to make few people join into a particular group, and then within that group people can send a message. So all these things are possible, but this is very basic and it's a very working prototype. So any message you send will be coming back to you. Okay, now let us see how we can code this thing. First of all, I have added a very specific, static resource, HTTP load static resource. So what does this do is that, it loads the web page that you currently see here. So which is nothing but this web page, right? So this web page is an HTML page having some JavaScript, some CSS, and MuleSoft is not just specific to your integration front. It can also be used as any server for loading your HTML stuff also. So this is very handy for people those who don't know that load static resource is something which can be used to kind of load your HTML stuffs into it. So you can also deploy your Angular code. You can create a build and then you can deploy it in some folder and mark it as a template out here in the resource based path, and it will load that for you. So it will load that HTML template or HTML whatever you have it. So in this case, I have created a very basic HTML. It's a normal doc type HTML, and I am loading the CSS and the JavaScript out here. So I have my very specific, I have this CSS out here and I have my JavaScript out here. I'll just briefly show what the JavaScript code looks like. It's not relevant to the MuleSoft platform, I will speak on on brief on this one. So all I do is that I have some functions which establishes connection, and you can ignore all these things. So basically, some functions which will be inserting the the DOM into it. So every time somebody sends a message, in the front end, what we do is we get the message in the form of a JSON, and then call that method insert chat. So to understand who is it coming from and what image to show and all this thing, based on which I am adding the HTML part of it. And then there is a send chat. What it will do is, whenever you are sending a message, right? Whenever you click this send button, so it will kind of trigger this function, and it will send the message. So ws.send, as you can see, it will send the JSON message to the server, and from there it will be routed. And whenever you receive a message, so this is where you receive the message. So once you receive the message, I'll parse that. So the message comes in the form of a stringified JSON. We'll parse that JSON and we'll use that insert chat method that I told you. So pretty basic, nothing fancy, like any it's a JavaScript code for doing the client side part of this. So this is where this comes handy. So this will be loading that particular template or that HTML that I talked about, and using that you can then connect to the chat application that you can see it. Now in my hackathon submission, what I did was I kind of used two things. I used experience layer and then system layer. So in the system layer, I created a very basic CRUD based API, and it was like where the data resided, like who is connecting and what are the names and images and all this stuff. For this meetup, I kind of took a different turn. I wanted to show that it's not just that you need to have a system API to make this work. So I came up with this object store configuration. Now object store is also very useful, right? So object store can be used to save the temporary data, and you can then use that as a form of a not a very useful database per se. Like it can be used as a persistent store per se, right? So you can save the sockets, and you can save the people those who are joining, and that part of it can be used as an object store. This is something different from what I did for my hackathon submission, and as I said, in the hackathon submission I created another system API. Now coming to the configuration files, right? So these are the three configurations that we need to do, very basic configurations. So first one will be a HTTPS listener. So this is a very basic HTTPS listener. So this will be connected to the port 8082, and I created a TLS config as well. Now this TLS config is pointing to a self signed certificate. So I created a self signed certificate out here, and I created this TLS configuration, global TLS configuration, and then I use that TLS configuration in my HTTPS connection. Now this one will be used as a global reference out here, and this will do the job of HTTPS based connection. So as you can see, over here I'm using an HTTPS. Now you might be seeing this as a not secure because this is self signed, it's not CA signed. So whenever you get a CA signed certificate, that is where your computer trust store knows that this is coming from a legit source, and that is why it will not show an error. But when you use worker, so this is on worker, I'll come to this why I am using this. But connecting to the HTTPS configuration out here, because that certificate that I created is a self-signed one, so that is why you got an error while you are connecting. Now coming to the main part, this WebSocket configuration. Now there are two types of configuration that you can do. So one is a server and the other is a client. Now from the slides I already told that there are two types of socket type that you have in the WebSocket connector. So one is a server and the other is client. In this particular one, I am using it as a server, right? So that is why I have configured this as a server setting. This is the base path. So I mean, which path will it be connected to make that WebSocket connection. And also you need to use the listener config. So this is the same listener config that I showed earlier, which is also reused as a part of that, the stable thing that is being loaded. So this is the listener config. So what it does is that the full duplex connection that is being created is created over this listener configuration. And then once the client joins with the server, it's a two mode communication now. So WebSocket can also send a message to client, and client can of course send a message to server. You can also create a client setting out here, and in this case you need to add your host and port and the base path, which is similar to this. And what it will do is that rather than you using this as a server, you will be using that as a client. So let's consider that there is some client created in maybe a Java based application, which is a WebSocket one. So you can use Mule to connect to that. So that is the other thing that you can definitely try. For this particular use case, as my front end is the client, so I haven't created this. Okay, so any question on the configuration part? I think no.
No questions. No questions so far. Well, guess that means you're pretty much explaining it pretty well. So.
Okay. Yeah, I'll try to cover as much as possible, but still, if there are any questions, you can always drop down and we can talk through it. So, yeah. So this covers the configuration part of it. So, we have an HTTPS listener. We created a TLS context. Not necessarily that this TLS context has to be a global one. You can even create a, inline TLS inline TLS context. That can also do, but you need to have an HTTPS one. And then finally the WebSocket config. All right, so that concludes our configuration point of view. Now let's come to the main part, right? So what should we do to make these things happen? Now see, this is not a lot of code, right? So it's really wonderful that with few connections you can make this happen, which you did, which we tried few minutes back. Wherein we were trying to chat, or we were trying to connect to each other, and this is nothing but this three subflows, which can see three subflows, or rather three flows, which made that all possible. And we can check what each of this does. Now, WebSocket, this connector will not be available by default, so you have to go to search in Exchange, and in Exchange you can search for WebSocket. So once you search for WebSocket and you add it out here, so that is when you finish, and then that is where your WebSocket will be added, so that you can explore it and use it for your use cases. Now out of these, there are a lot of options out here, but for this particular prototype or use case that I developed, not all of these were useful. Simple inbound connection, new inbound message, and on socket close. These are the three things, and along with it, a send. So these are the four things that was used to make this thing possible. Now let's explore what each of them will do. So on inbound connection, right? So I already said that it is a full duplex communication. So whenever a client is trying to establish a connection with the server, so this is the first subflow, or the first flow that will be called. So over here you have to add the connector configuration. So this is nothing but the same WebSocket config that I showed in the global configuration file, and the base path is slash out here. But you need to check one thing, that although it is slash, but in the configuration I have added one base path as WSS. So this is WSS out here. So invariably it will always add slash WSS for all your connections to the WebSocket that you make. You can add here anything, like maybe chat or something. So that's all possible. Like you can have multiple inbound connections to different paths listening, and it can trigger on different events, or you can do some other work on that. So it's all possible. For this particular chat application, I have only used one single base path. So this base path will be listening to that /WSS, and it will do the job. Now on new inbound connection is like, every time a new client comes in and logs in, or goes to that URL that I gave you guys. So this is the first flow that will be called, and what it will do is that, first of all, I need to get the socket ID. So this socket ID is like, the unique identifier for that particular socket client, and that is present in this attributes.socket ID. So if we see all the metadata out here, which is again very handy to see what it is. So these are all the different values. Socket ID is something that is good enough to understand the unique identification of that socket client. And once I get the socket ID, I'm saving it in a variable. It's not necessary. I mean, we can also use directly the attributes of socket ID. But it's just that, I created a variable out here, which might come handy later, like, if we have to. And then finally, I am saving it into the object store. Now, this is where, is something which is different from what I did in the hackathon submission. Over here, I was trying to call the system API to do the operation of, writing into the database that, this is the socket ID of the person who is trying to connect. And the object store configuration that I've created is a pretty decent one, nothing fancy, but let's see that. I've created a persistent object store. Now, the benefit of persistent object store is that, I can see those objects being created on the runtime manager. I'll show that in some time. But you can also create a transient one. It doesn't matter. As long as we have an object store which is working, and it's able to save the data and fetch it, we are good. Max entry is 500. So this means that, if by any chance 500 people joins into this room, then it will not work. I mean, you can even remove this if it is not needed. I mean, just for the configuration sake, I have added this as 500. I mean, there's no limit per se, right? So you can add more as well, like 600, 700, whatever your numbers you are okay with. You can also remove this in all, and you can have the TTL and the expiration intervals present. So this TTL is active for 10 minutes from now, and after 10 minutes, those values will no longer be present. And this is the object store configuration. So in the object store config, it's just a reconnection strategy that I have added. Now this can be changed or tweaked as per our requirement, but this object store is just a medium to save who is coming, like who is initiating the communication and all this thing. That's it. Now, if we run this flow, what it will do is that it will just give us the socket ID, but we also need to save the name and the avatar image that you are seeing out here, right? So this is the avatar image that you can see. So like whoever is selecting, so like, so these are the two avatars that I have added as of now. So these images and or the link to those images and what the name is, all these things also needs to be saved. So for that configuration, that is something that I have added at this subflow or the flow. So whenever a message is received, so first one is the connection inbound. So connection inbound is that I have established the connection. Now I'm good to go. Now every time a message is being sent from client to server, this is the flow that is being called. And again the same, right? So I have the path which is base path and the configuration which is the WebSocket config. That's it. Now again we have the attribute, wherein in the attribute we can see the socket ID out here. So this is the socket ID out here. So again I'm saving it into the variable. So this socket ID is same as this one. For each client it will be unique and it will not change. So I am saving the socket ID, and then I'm doing some transformation out here. So the first transform message component that you can see in this flow. So what it does is that whatever payload that you are sending, it will, considering that it's always JSON, because I have coded this, I know that I'm sending it JSON in that particular JavaScript file that I showed you guys. So I was sending a JSON out there. So I'll read it, and this is similar to parsing the JSON to make it unstringify or parse it. So since the payload will be in the stringified form, so I'll read it in the form of an application JSON. So it will make it possible to kind of use it as a JSON structure down the line. So after that, I am saving this.
Hello. Yeah, Tirthankar, sorry to interject. Just before you move further, there are 3 questions so far. So I would like us to just address those so that we don't go too far from that. So Supriya first asked, can you show in which option, or can you show in panel which WebSocket you have selected, which meant which option? I'm not quite sure about the question. Does the question make sense? Do you understand that? She said, show which option.
Okay, I think she might have got confused between the sockets and the WebSocket. So this comes by default. So this is not the one that we will use. There is a WebSocket, so it's a different connector all in all. And as I said, you will not get that directly. You need to search it in the exchange. So if you do WebSocket, give me a minute. WebSocket. So this is something that you need to search here, and once you add it and then click finish, that is when this new connector will be added out here. And this is the WebSockets connector that we'll use for this particular integration that I'm talking about, and not the sockets one.
Okay, cool. Yeah, she said it was already covered. And the second, Igor asks, are there any limitations when it comes to the number of WebSocket clients?
I don't think that there is any limitation per se. I mean, I haven't really created any production ready application as of now within using WebSocket in MuleSoft, but I have created a few in Node using socket.io, but I didn't find any issues in that. So I don't think there are any limitations of using this, because till the point your server is able to handle those connections, and you can scale it and increase, then I think there won't be any problem.
Okay. Yeah, cool. Yeah, because I was also wondering myself, like, is there some kind of like limitation on even using the WebSocket connector itself? But
No, I don't think there is any limitations per se. Like as of now, since there are not a lot of users that are connected right now, right? So I mean that's something, but uh, this particular connector is like you can definitely scale this application, right? So you can, if you are using Cloud Hub, then you can increase the workers, or if you are having on-prem or runtime fabric, you can scale that as well. So each of this will be working independently, so I don't think there will be any problem as such. But if anybody has anything, others who have joined in and they have tried, or they are aware of any such problems or limitations, then I am all ears.
Okay. Yeah, cool. Yeah, moving. Mijabin asked, is one socket being used by all the participants? How does that happen?
So one socket is not being used by all the participants. The sockets are different for each of them, and I think this is the best time I should show it in the platform. That what happens. So as I was saying that I am saving it in the object store, right? So we can see that over here. Hopefully this opens soon. Okay, so this is the chat application that I created. So the search, right? So 100 mule messages. That is great. Okay, so object store. So as I use a persistent one, I can see it out here, and I kept a limit of 10 seconds, right? So that is where things got removed. Maybe we can try this once again, and I'll show. So this is a new, key that is being added out here. And if we see this, okay, let me copy. So this is the first socket that got connected and it got saved in the object store. Now, if I create another one, let's say, all right. So somebody else might have also connected, but as you can see, okay. All right. So this is a new, WebSocket configuration that was added, and this is another one. So as you can see, these values are different, right? So every time a new, a client connects, so there is a new socket ID that is generated, which is unique to that client, and this can be used as a medium for all the, communication. So this is where things are useful when it comes to socket or web sockets.
Okay. Lastly,
okay, I think Manik answered that I think not for inbound but outbound can be configured for certain limits. Okay, thanks Manik.
Yeah. Lastly, there was just one question there. Are there any port restrictions? Port restrictions?
No port restrictions, but I was going to come to it. This particular WebSocket needs DLB for configuration. So it needs a dedicated load balancing because, as you can see, this particular one, it's giving out an error out here, right? So I'm connecting to the worker URL out here to make this work. Now you can redirect your traffics using the DLB for any port. By default, the shared load balancer only allows 8081 and 8082, right? So that is why I have used 8082 in my configuration. Because I am using a HTTPS based, I could have gone for an HTTP based as well. So I could have created a WS. Okay, this is a good point that we are coming to actually. So let me cover that as well. So there are two types of WebSocket connectivity that you can make. So one is WSS. If I show it in the client, then it will be more clear. So there is a WS and there is a WSS. So what WSS means it's a secured one, and what WS means it's an unsecured one. Now, when we use it over, this, what do you call it? When we use it over this particular uh, web, uh, it doesn't allow a WS connection. So that is something which even I discovered because this was a learning opportunity for me as well. The WebSocket connector. So WSS is something which is only used when we connect it over this over the net, over the internet. So that is why I have created a HTTPS listener, and that is the listener config that I have added out here. So this invariably maintains that TLS configuration and everything, and you create a WSS. Uh, in that app.js file that I was trying to show you. Let me open that again. So this is the type of connection that I'm making, WSS. I could have made WS as well. WS will work perfectly fine in local. In my local environment, it will work absolutely fine, no problem at all. But when I am trying to deploy it into the runtime manager and trying to connect, it won't, because there are some restrictions over when you are using this particular uh, web-based connectivity. When traffic is load balanced, many inbound servers. Yes, I think we can use it. WebSocket work well when traffic is load balanced, right? So yeah, I don't think there will be any problem per se, because uh, I mean each of them will be listening, right? So we have an inbound connection out here. So if you load balance it shouldn't be a problem. And also you have a message received. So each of them will be listening to this configuration. So it's pretty similar to what will happen in HTTP as well, I think. Yeah. Can we use the same HTTP listener for both WebSocket and normal HTTP requests? Is there a performance issue if we have too many open connections? Yes, I am using the same HTTP connection for both WebSocket and normal HTTP. I'll show that once again. So I am having this HTTPS configuration, actually not an HTTP but HTTPS configuration, and it is having the TLS configuration out here. And in this Mule app that I have created, as you can see, so this is the HTTPS listener configuration. I haven't created a new listener configuration. However, I can do that. There's no problem at all. I can create a new, connector configuration for HTTP. But the problem is that if you are using shared load balancer, right? So you cannot have the you cannot map too many ports. There are only limited number of ports at your hand that you can use. You can definitely try all these things out with your own DLB setup, and or maybe on premise. So on premise will work well, I feel, because you can have multiple ports listening to them. I mean, 808.9 listening to your HTTP thing. Multiple. You can also create multiple WebSocket connectivities or connections as well. So one listening to 8081, one listening to 8083, something like that. But since runtime manager has a very restricted openings, 8081 and 8082, that is why I created this one. Performance issue if we have too many open connections. As I said, I haven't really tried this as a production level, right? In the production grade. But I tried using socket.io, as I said earlier, using a node based application, but I didn't find any issue with performance per se. And this is on the similar line, right? So I don't think there will be any problem with the performance or anything. Whenever there is a problem at all, the connection will get terminated, right? So that is when your connection closed or on socket closed flow will be called, and you can take care of what to do. So I don't think there will be any questions or any problem as such. Okay, Manna, are we good with?
Oh yeah, I think we're good for question and answers for now. You can continue with the rest of the presentation of the demos. Yeah.
I think a lot of good questions coming up, and it's really great to share and also
Sure.
get to know what people think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So yes, so this is where I was. How do we handle the messages? So two things that needs to be done. So one is get the message, and the second is routing the messages. So I think all of you can see there's a choice router out here, which might be ringing a bell that yeah, we need to do some routing. But all right, let's come to that. So I already told that each of this WebSocket configuration. So every client connecting to the WebSocket will get its own individual socket ID. Now, whenever we connect, I think this is more of a client application perspective. This is how I have configured this application in my JavaScript. That is why I'm doing this particular thing that I'll be saying right now. So the first time I initiate a connection, I don't send any extra details like what is the name, what is the avatar link, and all this thing. I keep it very small. I just send the socket ID so that I register it with my socket or object store. That a new connection has come in. That's all right. Now this connection, whatever the socket ID was there, next time it will always be the same socket ID. It will not change. So the socket ID comes in again, and for the first time, I send all those additional details. By additional details, I mean what is the name of that person and what is the avatar image that the person has selected. And this is where I kind of save these details, or I send these details in the payload, and I first of all I read it, so I parse that stringified JSON, and then I save it in the message variable. Saving this in the message variable will come handy because if we do retrieve or transform something, we'll not lose that actual message that was being sent. So I am using it two way actually. This payload that I'm sending, I'm using it two way. One way is to actually send the first part of the details, like what is the name and what is the avatar link and all, and further down the line, whatever messages are coming, that is something that is present in this variable. And I am logging this. So new message received from, who is the person who is okay, this is something which is actually from what I said from the privacy policy and stuff. That I am logging this message, but yeah, definitely we can always mark it and make sure that nobody is able to see it. But if you can see the logs, let us see the logs. That will make more clear. So this is the socket that was received, and as you can see, so we see Manna out here, right? So Manna was one who initiated a connection and then he sent the details. This is the avatar and this is the socket ID. Now this is not something that he typed on the message, right? This is coming on the very first call that I'm making, just to save these avatar details and the name of that person. That's it. So this choice router is something which is doing the job. So I'm just making it, if the message is having init or not. Now in the app.js, it's mostly, in the JavaScript that I've done from the client perspective, as I said. But I'll just give you a brief idea what I did here. So if you can see this particular line, so when I'm opening a connection, first of all, so this particular code, right? When it opens a connection, it will first call that particular flow on connection opened, and then I'm sending the first details. So what is this details? This is the name of the username. So in Manna's case, it was Manna Arpan, and then after link, whatever he selected out of those two selections, so that image link, and then the messages in it. So this is kind of telling me that this init message is the first message that I'm sending, just to save all these extra details, which is definitely not present when the first connection is established. So that is why I've added this a choice block out here to check the message. If it is init, that means if it is not in it, that means it is the normal messages that the people are sending, and if it is in it, that means I need to save those additional details. So in the socket, then I'm updating it, right? So in the object store, I'm updating whatever details I need to save. So in this case, it is the name, the avatar, and the socket ID. So these all the details are getting saved. In this case, the key for me is always the socket ID, because as I said, it's a unique identifier, right? So in this particular case, as you can see, each of these are different values for each client that is joining in. So yeah, so this is the key and this is the value. Now there's also something that I'm doing here. I'm retrieving the value from object store. So the kind of integration that I did here is, there are two ways that can happen. One is it might be an init. So that means I have to save some details with additional details, that is the name and the after link and all these things. And the second is that I have already saved it, but I need to retrieve who is the sender, all those details. Because whenever you send me your messages, it will just be the message and the socket ID. But I need to know the socket, who is that socket ID belongs to, right? Who does that socket ID belongs to? For all those details, I can retrieve easily from the object store. Now there is a concept of target variable out here, so it's like a message enricher. So I'm saving all these details that are being that we get from the object store onto this target variable called sender. So over this, in the sender, all the details will be present. So his name and his avatar link, to be very brief. The message is already with me, so I already know the message which is present in this message variable. Now comes the important part. If it is not an init, that means the person has sent me a message that I need to send to all the others in the room, or all other people who are connected. So next I do from object store perspective is get all the socket IDs that are there. So if I see from the runtime manager that I showed you guys, that there were three socket IDs, unique socket IDs. So this particular call will retrieve all the socket IDs, and then so this socket ID will also have the socket ID of the sender. So that is something to be noted here. So I am a sender, Manna is a receiver, but the socket ID, if I do a retrieve socket ID from the object store, it will have the socket ID of me as well as him. Now if I do send message to all the retrieve keys, that means I'll be sending a message to myself as well, right? If that makes sense. So that is where I'm filtering the user. So I'm filtering all the users such that if the the socket ID doesn't belong to the one who is sending it, and this var socket ID is nothing but the socket ID of the sender. So I want to remove the socket ID of the sender, and I want to keep all the socket IDs other than that, so that I know that this message came from Manna. So I will remove the socket ID of Manna, and everybody else who is there, who is connected, and they have their socket IDs established in the or present in the object store. They can be then send the message. So after that, I am doing a for each loop, and I am sending the message to all of them. Now there are other ways as well. There is broadcast, and then you can subscribe to a group and then send it. This is like the very basic way of doing it. And why this will be useful? Not every time you want to do a broadcast, right? You might want to create a single single room chat, wherein something like WhatsApp does, right? So you select one user, and then for that particular user only you want to interact. You don't want to send a message to anybody else. So this is where this part will be useful. So you want to send the message only to that particular one. So this send message or the send operation is very useful. So all you need to do is what is the socket ID of that person you need to give, and you need to send the message. So what message I want to send that person. So the message is nothing but the message which the sender sent. Sender details is like the name of the sender, which is so if you remember, I showed you that in the retrieve sender I created a target variable. So in the sender variable, all the sender details are there, his name and his avatar. So I'm sending this, I'm creating this JSON of sender and avatar, and then I'm sending it to the people other than the sender, so which is handled by this particular filter message. So in the for each loop, every time I'll be getting a new sender and then I'll be sending it. This can, however, be made a little better if I add a async scope out here, right? So if I wrap it in an async scope, this can be better. So that's an enhancement that I can think of right now, because if I send it like one by one, if considering that there are 400 or 500 people in the room, and looping over it is not a good operation. We can definitely use a broadcast. That is one. Or the second is, even if we are looping, we can wrap it in an async loop, because there's nothing to be returned to the sender, right, at this point of time. So just one additional thought that I wanted to share over here. So these are the two operations that we can definitely use. So any question on this one? Like this is the most important flow of this whole integration per se. I think there are. Okay, Manik answered that.
Yeah, so far there are no outstanding questions aside from the one that has been answered already. So
this was like the part of the flow wherein we were handling the message that was being received. So all the messages that were being received will either be saved into the object store, like the additional details, the name and the avatar link, or else we'll be sending the message down to the other users. So that completes our the message received flow. Finally, we'll come to the connection close. Now connection close is like where, so as I said, connection can be established by the client, and it's a dual connection that is being established. So user can, client can send a message to server, server can send a message to client as well. But the connection disconnect can be done either by client or by server. In this case, if the client is disconnecting, so if I close this, right, if I close this, that means I have disconnected it. And if I have disconnected it, so it should definitely remove that entry from the object store. Although I have kept it as a 10 minutes time, so that is why we are not able to see it. But let's give this a try once more. So a new WebSocket is added. So once I close it, so it got removed from the keys. So that is something that I have handled out here. So if anytime a user is disconnecting, so I'm removing that user from my object store. So that is why I'm using this remove operation of object store. Again, the socket ID is nothing but the same socket ID. So attributes.socket ID is something which we'll be getting, and then I'll be using that key to remove that user from the from the particular object store. So that completes our very basic prototype of this implementation. The use case is very large, right? We can have a lot of use cases for this. So this is just a chat application that I've said here. We can integrate this with some chatbots or anything. We can even have multiple many other sources can be there, and we can send those messages using this object store key configuration, and the user will be getting the message back. uh, so I think that pretty much it covers everything from the object store and the WebSocket connector, as well as the inbound, outbound. Not the outbound, because we are using Mule in this case as a server, but all the connection established and message initiated and everything. So yeah, I think that's it from my side, Manna. You have any other thing to discuss?
Oh, awesome! Thanks for that. I was just gonna ask, or if like folks want to try this out. Like, is this on GitHub, or is there a link where we can like get some of the code base to use it for?
Yes, I will definitely publish this in GitHub and I'll share that.
Okay.
And this is exactly the same thing that I have in my blog as well. So everything that changed from that the hackathon submission, I have added all the details out here. So the architecture. So in this case, it's a web app. So the same Mule chat app is using as a web app, as well as routing the message. Now it can be web client, Android client. In this case, it was an Android and web, but we can have many other as well. I also ended up creating a normal Java code as well, wherein it was connecting to the WebSocket. So there are numerous use cases that we can do. Then I have covered what are the object stores, what is the configuration looking like. So then what is the experience layer, what are the configurations that I have added, server setting, HTTPS listener, so the JS client is something which I haven't added here because I kept it strictly for MuleSoft. But I will definitely add that in my GitHub so that people can try this out. And I have covered everything, like initiating the connection, how does that connector looks like, routing the message, how does that connection looks like, closing the sockets and all, web UI. So this was a very basic web UI, and this is how the connections were getting established. So I have pasted the link out here as well, and yeah, that's it then. I am open to any questions or any suggestions.
Yeah, no, for sure. Thanks for explaining that. Are there any questions, last minute questions or things that you would like some clarification on? Feel free to put it in the chat if you have any questions. Um, Lastly, I know I still owe one more trivia question, which I'll put on the chat. So you know what? I'm just gonna do it right away as I share my screen. So the last trivia question, number 3. There you go. Oops, that looks all clubbered, but all right, there you go. Danesh Kumar was the fastest finger there. It's 4.2.2 and higher. So please, Danesh, send me a direct message with your email address, and we'll take it up from there. I'm just going to share my screen lastly. And so first of all, thank you to Tirthankar for that presentation. I think it was really, really well explained, especially with the use case. The code base as well was also good to follow. I think it was nicely done. Thank you again for that explanation and your time. And
Thanks, Manna, for inviting me to this wonderful meetup. And it was really exciting to talk in front of all these experienced people and give my insights a try. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, for sure. I'm definitely eager to try this out on my own. I don't have a lot of experience in WebSockets, so this would be a good kind of like get my feet wet and that. So yeah, and also please feel free to share, if you enjoyed the presentation, feel free to give kudos on LinkedIn to our speaker. If and also there is a feedback page, a survey that will be sent to you after this MuleSoft event is over. We also have um, an Instagram page for Winnipeg, the MuleSoft meetup here in Winnipeg, which is at MuleSoft Meetup WPG, and also some hashtags as well. All right, I think that really concludes. I don't think I have any other thing here in the slides. Okay. That really that concludes everything that I had on my own plate. Or there are any other questions or comments? You're welcome, Tomasz. No, Manik, I don't have a Twitter handle on that one yet. Guess I'll probably add that to the list. Oh, mine. Oh my God, I have to check where mine is at. But I'll send that. I'll put that. I have a Twitter handle. I don't use Twitter that often these days. That's why. Yeah. Okay, it looks like there are no other questions. So, anyways, thank you all for joining. It was fun having you around, hanging out on this Saturday. I'm gonna retire my folks in India, my friends in India, to go sleep now because it's pretty quiet. It's quite late or very early in the morning where you are. So I was asking for this question. This will be recorded. Yes. This session is currently recorded. The recording of this video will be shared on the MuleSoft Meetup Winnipeg page, the wrap up page. So if you just go there, you would be able to see that. Yeah. Let me share the link again. Let me share our link again. 1 second. Just go. I think anybody that if you go to that page, putting it up in the chat. That's the event page. If you go to the event wrap up page, that's where the recording will be posted up there at the end as well. And also, Tirthankar, if you can share your slides with me as well, so I can upload that on or you're on mute. So yeah, so I can upload that on the page. Yeah. All right. Okay. Thanks, Manik. Thanks for joining. It was really great. Thank you, Tirthankar, again. And that concludes our event for today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of the week. Take care.